once again, we are talking about another horror comedy movie.
One of my favorites, by the way.
But we are also doing what we always say we should do on this show, and that is stick to what we love, and that is 80s horror, and we're going back to the 80s.
1987.
Yeah,
the late 80s.
29 years ago.
Oh my gosh. Really? Is that how, when you do the math, that's what you come up with? Oh my gosh. That's crazy.
So, you know, it's funny, we were just talking about this yesterday, going back and forth. The day that we were recording this is the day after Slash's 51st birthday.
Wow. Yeah, the rock and rollers are getting old. The movies are getting old. We're getting old. Heck, we're talking about a movie that was on VHS. That's probably the most... Why most of you have seen this movie is because of VHS, because I know none of you saw it in the theater.
The other thing that we were talking about with Slash turning 51 was the fact that Appetite for Destruction, the album that probably the two of us would consider one of the greatest, if not the greatest albums of all time, came out just over 29 years ago.
That's absolutely crazy. Yeah, Appetite for Destruction is my favorite rock album of all time. I mean, in terms of like every song, I pretty much there's like maybe one or two songs that are like okay, but I still like them. But like the rest of, I mean, it's just I love the album. It's like, and to be honest with you, if you look at it, like what other album other than Appetite for Destruction was that influential outside of the only one that came after that, and then nothing since has been Nirvana's Nevermind, where like, you know, it was like just a massive album, changed everything and exploded. So like, yeah, Appetite for Destruction that's a great album, man. I mean, starting out with Welcome to the Jungle and then ending with Rocket Queen. Yeah,
actually,
huge Guns N' Roses fan.
Welcome to the Jungle and Paradise City are two of the songs that I could, if I was listening to it on a CD or something, I could skip over just for the fact that I've heard those so many times, which is funny because Sweet Child of Mine is still one of my favorite songs of all time, which I know is a little cliche when people are like, oh, really? But yeah, I mean, that song is still great.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, Appetite's one of those albums you could put on, and there's very few that come out anymore that you can put on repeatedly and listen to from start to finish. I mean, there's a few that come out every once in a while, but there's always stuff that, you know, you skip over, like, oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right, I'm going to listen to this. I'm going to go right to track number 4, or I'm going to go to track number 6, or I'm going to listen to track 1 and 2, and then I'm going to go to 8 and 9 or something.
Yeah, you know, the funny thing, too, about the Appetite was it was one of those albums that, like, everybody liked it. You didn't have to be like the stoner kids. You know, it was like the headbangers liked it, the jocks liked it, the preps liked it, you know, the punkers liked it. It was like just like everybody got into it. You know, it was just exploded, and you know, the funny thing though is when it came out, we were like in like 6th grade, I think, 5th or 6th grade, and I remember I didn't really like them back then. It took me a while to warm up to Guns N' Roses. I mean, I liked Welcome to the Jungle, but like I was like really into like Iron Maiden and stuff like that, and back then, and like I just like, oh, I don't want to get into Guns N' Roses. They're too popular. A few years later, I was like, I revisited that album, and I was like, wow, like every single song on this album is great. Like this is like the best album ever recorded in this decade. And I just like, and now it's like, you know, I look back at it, and of all the bands and stuff, like maybe 3 or 4, if it's a good album, they've got like 3 or 4 good songs on it, but Appetite, like really the whole thing is great.
Yeah, I got Appetite for Destruction that year for my birthday from our good buddy from back in the day who lived exactly 1 block away from me going
west.
Yep, going west. We had the same address and everything. Well,
oh, really?
No, I take that back. We didn't, because he lived on the opposite side of the street. But he had like, his was 18, mine was 17.
Okay.
He got me that album on cassette for my birthday that year. And then, interesting fact, even though I know this is like the second show or the second episode in a couple of episodes that we've talked about Guns N' Roses, but there's two bands that have had albums that I have had in every conceivable media form except for 8-track, and I would assume none of the albums that I'm talking about would have been on 8-track, so it doesn't really count. But Appetite for Destruction, I had on cassette, I've had on CD, I have on record, and I know for a fact that I've had multiple copies of that album on cassette and CD, and there's been a few other albums that hold true to that very standard.
And didn't I give it to you, the cassette copy, just last year?
I do have a new copy of that cassette. Yep. Well, not new, but yeah, a copy of that cassette in my cassette collection.
And the copy that I gave you came from that mutual friend, because he gave that to me. So did you say you bought that for him?
Heck, you know what? It could even be the same copy. It might have been
so
one.
Funny.
It's very possible. But
That's so funny.
Appetite I had on multiple ones. Another debut album by a band that I had on all media forms is 10 by Pearl Jam. I had that on CD first, and then I had it on cassette, and then I wore out both, and then I got them again. And then I've actually that's the only album that I've had multiple versions on vinyl, because I actually wore out, if you want to call it that, but the old copy I had got wrecked, and then I got a new copy of it. But Guns N' Roses is the only band that I can say, well, minus Chinese Democracy, which I wouldn't really consider a Guns N' Roses album because it was Axl and Friends.
Yeah, you gotta say that.
But Lies and both of the Illusion albums I have had on cassette, CD, and record.
Wow. Yeah, I've only had the Illusions on cassette, and I still have them somewhere, I think.
Yeah, and I still have multiples of every Guns N' Roses record.
Wow.
So I have them all on record, and I even have Chinese Democracy on record, but I have them all on record, and then I have all of them either on cassette or CD as well, and then MP3, of course. And that's even including the spaghetti incident.
I assume we're talking about this because in 1987, Appetite was released, and also the Monster Squad, right?
Yep, and I think the Monster Squad movie came out just about a month after Appetite actually came out.
You're right, yeah, because Appetite was July, so yeah, August was the Monster Squad. Wow. That's crazy. So Guns N' Roses was just on the scene right when this movie came out. Yeah, too bad they didn't use any Guns N' Roses songs, because that rap song at the end is pretty terrible.
I would say this is one of the first movies we've talked about on this show that the both of us, along with other folks, probably saw it for the first time together. I don't remember exactly the first time I saw this, but I mean, we were all friends at the time, so I mean, we had to have seen it at some point. When it was either was brand new, or I mean, I don't remember if I saw this in a theater or not.
This one I remember. This was one of those movies that this was a VHS rental for me for sure, and that's how I first discovered it. And I remember, strangely enough, picking this up, watching it, and it was one of those movies where you'd rent it and you'd like, oh, that was really good, and then like maybe a few weeks later you go back and rent it again, and I gotta watch Monster Squad again. It's like, do you remember back in the day when you would go to the video store for all of your movie needs? Like, there was cable and there was TV, but if you wanted to like watch a movie, you'd just go wander around the video store and grab the movies, and so there'd be repeat rentals. Well, this was like one of those movies where I remember my brother and I rented it quite a few times, because it was like, that's a fun one.
the story of this movie is at the time was pretty cool to a lot of kids that were our age, and I would assume we weren't the only kids at the time that were huge horror fans.
Oh, no way.
But, you know, the premise of this movie basically is that all of the old Universal monsters are essentially real, and they come to be every 100 years or something like that. And there's this group of kids that, you know, are huge monster fans. And of course, they're like the monster fans of like the old Universal monsters. So, you know, they're Dracula and the Wolfman and the Mummy and all this stuff. And they form this club called the Monster Squad, and they're going to fight these monsters off.
Yeah, these are like a bunch of horror fans, kind of like what we were as kids. Like it was you and me and like maybe one or two other people who had this kind of addiction to horror movies back then. And like, I mean, these kids, this was us. We were kind of like, you know, it's funny because nowadays, like this type of thing is sort of like you get these like Comic-Con and, you know, all these conventions, all this, and it's like just sort of normal. But back then it was like you were a horror fan and like, you know, you were like into this stuff. Like it was kind of like sort of like you were sort of shunned. So like people didn't really, I mean, there wasn't any like venue for it. There were no websites or internet or anything like that. I mean, all we had was like Fangoria and like, you know, in the video store basically.
Yeah, one of the things that a lot of people online say nowadays is always, I was this, or I was that, or I was this before it was cool. And I mean, that was us. We were horror fans before it was cool.
Oh yeah, we had detailed discussions about movies like The Howling and Friday the 13th, and you know, we would go back to after school and watch these movies and like, you know, really get into it. Creepshow, Hello Mary Lou, all that stuff. You know, we were like,
this movie really was. You know, when I watch it now, it always kind of like, oh, you know, I could totally see this happening to us. You just replace that little girl, the younger sister of the one kid, with one of our younger siblings.
That's right.
You know, because both of us had younger brothers.
Yep.
The only thing that these kids had in their little group of people that we didn't have was they had like the older middle-aged school. You know, these kids are like 5th, 6th grade, and then they have like this 7th grade kid who's you know, I'm assuming is kind of probably a loser in his 7th grade class, but he's hanging out with the 5th graders or whatever, and they all think he's a badass and stuff. We didn't really have that kid that we hung out with. The real big explosion that's happened in the past couple of weeks is the show called Stranger Things on Netflix that the two of us have watched, and I had said like, oh man, that would totally be us in this group of friends that we had when we were kids. And that group of kids and this group of kids, you could almost blend them together and they would kind of be the same group of kids, except for in Stranger Things, they were, instead of horror, they were into comic books. Yeah. But the one difference between those two group of kids and the group of kids that we had when we were kids is we didn't have that chubby, stereotypical kid that all these 80 movies always throw in there.
Yeah, we didn't have the chubby kid.
Yeah. You know, you had this movie where they had the chubby, well, I don't remember.
Horace.
And you had him in this one, and you had like Chunk in, or not Chunk, but what was his face?
Chunk. Right, Chunk in the Goonies.
In the Goonies. And then the kid in the Stranger Things, he wasn't really I mean, he was chubby, but his thing wasn't that he was chubby. He was missing teeth.
Yeah. This movie is like the Goonies, basically the Goonies meets the Universal Monsters. You know, it's like you get these horror fans, these kids the Goonies was about, you know, these kids who want to go on a treasure hunt. And here we've got these kids that, you know, find out that they're the monsters that, you know, they read about in the books. You know, Wolfman, Frankenstein, and the werewolf and the creature, they're all alive and well, the mummy. And, you know, they have to battle these things because they're trying to take over their town. And the kid, too, I thought it was kind of cool. You know, he was the main kid, he's like, the introduction to him, he's wearing a T-shirt that says like Stephen King rules on it, and then his thing is like he loves this movie series called Groundhog Day, and clearly this must have been right before Groundhog Day with Bill Murray was out, so it was like kind of a meta fake film about kind of like a Friday the 13th Halloween ripoff about Groundhog Day and a slasher, going around killing everybody. So I always thought that was kind of cool. This was us, man. This was totally us. We were all into horror back then, 5th and 6th grade, and keeping up with the latest films, and wanting to go out to the movies when we could to see them, and then all of a sudden you find out that these monsters are like in their neighborhood.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The only difference too between these kids and us was we weren't into Universal at all. We were always into the newer stuff, but
yeah, we were like, that's the one thing too. Like I do appreciate the Universal films, Frankenstein and all that, and Wolfman and Dracula and all, and they're great films. But the ones that truly my passion were, the Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Texas Chainsaw franchises. That's where my passion came. That's why I liked horror, was because of those movies.
One of the things in this movie is they quiz the one kid, how do you do this? How do you do that? And he's answering them and stuff. If that would have happened to us, I don't know if we would have actually survived, because
right.
I was in 6th grade. I don't know if I ever saw a vampire movie, really.
Yeah, I watched my early memories of the Universal movies where I would watch the original Son of Svengoolie, and that's how I saw Frankenstein and Dracula back in the early 80s, just as a little kid, and I barely remember the films themselves, just like the basic plot points. But yeah, I wouldn't have known all the details.
Yeah, the only one that we would have been okay with would have been the werewolves.
Yeah, we were great on werewolf.
Yeah, we would have been okay with him. But man, as soon as Dracula showed up, we'd be like, oh, God damn,
right.
Man, I don't know what to do now.
Exactly.
Oh, it was nice knowing you, Mark.
Right.
I'll try not to come back and suck your young brother's blood or something.
There was actually talk of a remake of the Monster Squad, and I had read that they were considering using the modern horror characters like Jason and Freddy and all that to be the monsters as opposed to the Universal monsters, which would have been really cool. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how that would have come about. I'm sure that everybody that owned the rights to that would probably have gone nuts and wanted a big chunk of money. That would have been cool if they would have done that. Because like we've talked about before many times, the Universal monsters have become like, they're like the Halloween icons. Like you go to on Halloween, you go to the department stores and it's Frankenstein and Dracula, or, posters and stuff you hang in your wall. Well, it's really weird because as a kid, like when we were kids, there were no like, Friday the 13th, like Halloween decorations. But now, like when you go to Walgreens or something, they have like hockey mask like decorations and like little Jasons that you hang in your window and stuff. It's like crazy. Now they're becoming the new Universal monsters. And I even think I saw Michael Myers like Halloween, like decoration that you hang on your wall or something where it was like Michael Myers, and that as a kid that would have been so cool, but like it hadn't happened yet.
No, the only thing that we had even remotely was that costume department in the Jewel Osco would get Nightmare on Elm Street costumes in.
Yeah, that rubber mask and the glove.
Yeah, I don't remember them ever having a Michael Myers mask, or even I remember they always had like the cheapo, like plain white hockey mask.
Yeah, they had the crappy plastic with no, like maybe like 3 holes in it.
Well, I was gonna say, because I don't remember what grade we were in, but I remember somebody had one of those, and it had the weird like grill thing over the mouth.
Yeah, they still make those. Yeah, look more like Casey Jones from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, it's weird.
But you were asking about the Michael Myers mask. Yeah, they didn't have any like mainstream. You couldn't go to your grocery store like Walmart or Kmart or whatever to get a Michael Myers mask. They did. Don Post, the company that created the original William Shatner mask that they turned into a Michael Myers mask, actually had a mask that they called The Mask. That was the name of it. And it was like the unofficial Michael Myers mask, and it was a white rubber mask. And it was like they made it in like 1984, 85, 86. And it was it looked like Michael Myers, but it didn't look completely like it because they couldn't. There was all kinds of legal issues with that mask because they used the William Shatner thing. That was the closest thing. And back then, that I remember, my mom and I went to a Montgomery Ward when it was at the shopping mall Lakehurst, and there was one there, and that was the first time I had seen it in person, and it was like $39, and my mom was like, there is no way on earth I'm spending $39 on a rubber mask. And that's thankfully she has no clue of how much I spent on the one I have up in my closet right now. But so Monster Squad, like that's kind of funny because like the Universal monsters were probably kind of passé for these kids too, but they wanted to bring it back in a film, obviously. But like we really kind of we were sort of past, horror was sort of past Frankenstein and Dracula at this point, 87, we already had, Freddy was there, Jason, Freddy, Michael Myers, Leatherface, that was the modern horror era. Not many of us probably were into the old Universal monsters at that point, but
right,
obviously the writers were. Yeah,
this would have been sort of the tail end of the slasher genre.
Yeah.
This was right in the midst of all the sequel boom.
Yep.
So there wasn't really anything really new or fresh coming out. And then, of course, a couple years, you jump, a few years after this came out, and then that's when the whole remake of old classic monsters started to happen in the early 90s. So that, when you had Mary Shelley's Frankenstein with Robert De Niro, that Bram Stoker's Dracula, and they would always do that too. Right. They would always, Bram Stoker's Dracula, and they were always like 3.5 hours long.
Yeah, they're really trying to keep up with the books.
Really trying to do, and make it all modern. And I remember going and seeing Dracula in high school, and I have no idea who I went with, but I remember we went and we were high as a kite when we were watching it. And I remember like leaving the movie theater and thinking, oh man, that was really good. Kind of, being stoned and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then, at those, back in that day and age, like we were saying before, you watched movies either at the theater or you had them on videotape and watched them at home. But I remember I didn't see that movie for a couple of years after that, and put it in, and like it was however long it was, 3 hours long or whatever, and just remembering, oh my god, I remember like loving this movie. This is insane.
Yeah, it's funny because like the 90s to me were like, that was when horror like died, in my opinion.
Well, everything was so stylized and so.
Yeah. I mean, the only horror movie that I really, really appreciated in the 90s, and it probably wasn't really fully horror, was Silence of the Lambs. That pretty much terrified me. But everything kind of changed at that point. And then later on down the road towards the mid-late 90s was the Scream franchise started, and that just never appealed to me. And it really wasn't until like they started doing the reboots and remakes that like horror started to kind of interest me again. I mean, I was always into like all the old stuff, but like some of the newer like remakes and ideas they started having kind of interested me in the like the early 2000s and all of that. So I was like, oh, okay, it's coming back, and ever since then, man, it's been just rocking and rolling with it.
Yeah, the 90s. Yeah, they were saying those monster movies, and they're doing that again. You keep reading now that Universal is going to remake all of them, and they're going to bring all these big names into it, which I don't know why, because the Wolfman was horrible a couple of years ago.
Yeah, they just can't do it. And like the Creature of the Black Lagoon was supposed to be done, and they just, for whatever reason, like every time they try, it just doesn't work. And kind of like Monster Squad, the last time they really put them all together again was in that movie Van Helsing. I don't know if you saw that. And that was, they put all the monsters back in, and Frankenstein, Dracula, and all those guys, and that kind of had its, but that didn't even really seem to like grab a big audience. So it seems like for whatever reason, like these classic horror characters just aren't transferring well into the modern era. That Wolfman movie, like the casting was great for that, and like the trailer looked great, but then the just movie really fell flat. So I don't know what to think about that stuff anymore. Like I kind of think like the Universal monsters, like Universal had all those characters, and then the what was it, the 60s or 70s, and when Hammer came and did it again, it seemed like it got like a resurgence and was popular with Christopher Lee playing Dracula and the monster and all of that. But other than that, it just all these like new incarnations of these characters just don't seem to hold up.
Yeah, people just need to either come up with new stuff or do stuff right.
Yeah, and the Monster Squad was fun though. I mean, it was like they took it and they made it fun. It was fun to see the monsters in the movie, and at this point, like it was these monsters. I mean, clearly are no longer scary. I mean, it's funny because like I'm sure like when Frankenstein's monster was first revealed, whenever that movie was first released, I'm sure people were probably like passing out in the theater and running out and, oh my gosh, this is the scariest thing I've ever seen.
But maybe, but he wasn't that scary though. Maybe he was I can't imagine that he was even in 1987.
Well, it's funny because when Frankenstein, like his first reveal, it's pretty hysterical. I don't know if you remember this or not, but I remember watching this actually on Svengoolie when he played Frankenstein. Like Frankenstein, like the big reveal when they show the monster for the first time in the movie, like he enters walking backwards so that like they can like hold off a little longer before like you see him, and it's just like a very awkward entrance, and then he like turns around and you see him, and it's like, I'm sure like back then it was like, oh my gosh, but like nowadays it's like, Frankenstein is like, he's like an eraser top on Halloween, or like,
right, yeah,
he's like every like piece of candy is like shaped like him, or what I mean. It's like all the cartoon specials have Frankenstein in it, so it's like, that's funny. I wonder if there'll be a time when Jason is like becomes like that, where you turn on your like your SpongeBob Halloween special and like there's a guy in a hockey mask, kind of thing, or something like that, where it's so like mainstream and so like silly. I mean, it already kind of is with the hockey mask. That's such like a pop culture thing now, but I wonder if like there'll be a time when our beloved slashers like Freddy and Jason and Michael are all like, like our kids like are hanging up pictures of them in like their 5th grade class or something. You know what I mean?
To where me and you almost got kicked out of school for wanting to do it.
Exactly.
What's funny is we've been talking about this for like a half an hour and we haven't even really talked about the movie.
Yeah, that's right. So what did you even give a sketch of what the movie's about? I don't remember.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that the kids,
Okay.
These monsters come to be. This movie is really fun. There's a lot of, I guess slapstick comedy would be the term for it. And there's also too in this movie there is a few things where they sort of pay homage to the original. One of the things with the Frankenstein monster is that he befriends this young girl, and he does that in the original story of Frankenstein as well. But I do like that they managed to squeeze pretty much all of the main ones in there, even though the creature was only in for like a second and then gets shot. But
yeah, he doesn't last too long. And that guy who played Dracula in the Monster Squad, like he won some kind of award for like for being like the best portrayal of that character. In 2006, Wizard magazine made a list of 100 greatest villains of all time. Dracula was ranked as number 30 on that list, and surprisingly, it was Duncan Reggers, which is the guy who played him. his performance in this film. His performance was chosen over all other versions of the character. So Berger's Dracula is still considered to be one of the most absolute best interpretations of the character. I thought he did a good job.
Really?
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I don't know if I would put that guy as the best Dracula ever. I mean, you're going to go over Bela Lugosi as Dracula?
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Well, it was Wizard Magazine, 2006. Yeah, they were like he was. It was a big deal. Oh, and another thing we forgot to mention in this movie is that we learned that the Wolfman has nards. That's something that we didn't. I don't think you and I knew back when we were kids.
No, probably not. And that's one of those quotes. I think that's one of those quotes, movie quotes, that probably gets misquoted a lot. Right along the lines with the Luke, I am your father, which is the incorrect line. Because
yeah, probably.
I always remember us saying and hearing other people always say, the Wolfman doesn't have nards. And that's not what the line is. The line is, the Wolfman's got nards.
Right. And, you know, this movie is like, I mean, I guess we sort of like, I mean, did we, it's basically the Goonies with monsters, you know. A portal opens up and these monsters end up in modern day 1987. And like this, you know, these kids find out that these monsters exist and they have to basically stop them. And the only way to stop them is to get a virgin to say this chant. Yeah, this movie fits perfectly in 1987. Like, I could totally see like going to a movie theater or a drive-in and seeing a double feature of like Fright Night and Monster Squad, even though Fright Night was earlier, or like you know, it just has that total 80s vibe to it, like the soundtrack. It's got those real poppy, upbeat kind of, you know, tunes that, you know, they always played back then, like, you know, like you think of like early MTV type stuff.
Well, yeah, you gotta, this movie, if you like pay attention like through the movie, like, to whereas a lot of the movies are scored and they have the same sort of feel and sound to them throughout the movie. I mean, any of Carpenter's movies or any of the Friday the 13th movies, you know, they kind of have the same, like, sort of, like, not necessarily orchestrated feel, but they have that sort of, like, you know, classic score type of feel to them.
Oh, sure.
Even though Carpenter's are all done with some synthesizers and stuff. But this movie is, like, one of the movies, if you actually pay attention to it, there are, like, guitar solos as part of the score. I mean, it's just really, like you had
80s.
said, yeah, total 80s movie. I mean, everything, it was 80s. You know, you had these pre-teen boys who thought they were badasses, and for whatever reason, you know, Hollywood was spitting these movies out left and right for some reason back in the day. Because, I mean, there wasn't just this movie and the Goonies. I mean, there was a ton of movies back in the, like, late 80s that was that whole, here's this group of teenage boys who are getting into mischief.
Yeah, totally. Actually, this movie flopped in the theaters, too, and it was because I read that it was a terrible marketing campaign, which I don't even remember it in the theaters or even, like, any trailers or anything for it. But I guess they, like, put, like, posters up on buses and whatnot, and they showed, like, the monsters, like Dracula or whatever, and Mummy, and they, like, would said something like, the monsters are coming or something like that. Nobody, like, it didn't click with anybody. Nobody understood what that was about, what the Monster Squad was. So it actually didn't do very well in theaters. But this movie is like one of those movies you and I and whoever else, like, watched it on VHS or cable, and then, like, you know, been several years since then, they're like, holy crap, I remember that one movie. And then, like, now we're all, like, out there like, yeah, the Monster Squad, it's, like, great. And, like, you know, and then all these people that weren't around, all the younger generations are, like, catching on and like, yeah, this is a great movie. How come they don't make movies like this anymore?
Right.
So it's like, this one's going to be one of those movies, I think, that because of its cult following, I think it's going to be around for a long, long time. I think people are going to love it. And it's you know, I've showed my kids this movie. They seem to like it. And I've got it on DVD. I need to upgrade to Blu-ray now, but, like, and I've got the VHS too. I got it from our Volo trip. Oh, one of our Volo trips. Man, I highly, highly, highly recommend this movie if you just want a nice late '80s horror comedy, fun movie.
This is one of those movies that is, even though it was a flop, and yeah, it's gaining some traction now. And when you bring it up now, like everybody's like, "Oh, I love that movie."
I know.
Which is always, I always wonder when people say stuff like that, like, "Oh man, I love that movie." Like, do you love that movie, or did you just hear like the Wolfman doesn't have any nards so many times that you have it ingrained into your head that you love that movie?
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's like, I mean, and I actually watched this movie 2 years ago on Super Bowl Sunday instead of the Super Bowl. That's how much I love this movie. So now if you've done that, like you didn't watch the Super Bowl, but instead you watched Monster Squad, you're dedicated to this film.
I remember this from when we were kids, and I think this is one of the movies that our little group of guys probably watched on a regular basis.
Oh yeah, I imagine. Absolutely.
The Monster Squad, I give it a big thumbs up. I think this is one of the movies that still holds up in my book. I think if they were to do something like remake it, which I wouldn't be opposed to them remaking it, but I would go back to that idea of bringing in those monsters, maybe not even the monsters of our heyday, which I guess was actually before our heyday, but Michael and Freddy and Jason, but maybe even going a little bit further, make it even more modern and bringing in some of the newer monsters like the Jeeper Creepers monster or Chucky.
Yeah.
I mean, Ghostface would be a little bit of a stretch because, like, the two of us can't really stand Scream.
Yeah, let's stay away from that. I think it'd be cool. I think if I was to do an updated version of the Monster Squad, I would have Michael Myers, Jason, Freddy, Leatherface, and then, because we need a monster, like, kind of like a creature from the Black Lagoon or whatever, I would put the alien from the Alien movies. I think that would be a really cool monster movie to see all those guys in it. But because it took how long to make Freddy versus Jason, there's no way that they're gonna get all the rights to all those characters.
No.
And
yeah, and especially now,
it'll never happen. It'll never happen. But it's good to dream.